Welcome back to the ATI podcast. We're in here for episode 119. Our special guest this week, we're bringing back some St. Louis love to the show. We have Mr. Justin Mank of Not Waving But Drowning, Two Hands, One Engine. Justin, I know you've been in all kinds of other bands. Flow Clinic is another one that immediately comes to my mind. How are you doing this evening, sir?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for doing the show. This has been kind of a long time coming. I know you're a guy whose name has been mentioned several different times on this podcast for various people that I've talked to in the past, the Joey O'Farrells of the world, Calvin McRoy, Marcus Newstead, and I know that you were outside of just your music playing days, if you will, and the long history that you have there in St. Louis with that. And I know you kind of helped put on shows and things like that in the past as well in the St. Louis area.
Yeah, I was a concert promoter basically out of necessity just to get gigs for my first band. Yeah. So, like, the very first thing I did was with Todd from Not Waving, but it was called Hereafter, and it's kind of the lead into what ended up becoming Not Waving a couple of years down the line. But yeah, I didn't even do shows as putting on shows like as a career idea at first. It was really the only way that band could get any shows for some reason was if I just put it together myself. So we just made it.
Sure.
It was so weird.
I know that that's, kind of typical of some of the stories that I know have been told on this podcast in the past, especially for people that were trying to put on shows in like the Mineral area, if you will, as well. And I know that, Not Waving came down and was a part of some of those shows that were thrown down in our area, kind of the forefronts of the quote unquote local music scene that we had at the time. And,
Sure.
But I know a lot of that was kind of a chain reaction of, echoing what you guys were doing in St. Louis. And so people picked up on that down here and kind of did some of the same things. People that had bands wanted to have shows, and the way to do that was to put on their own shows. And, I don't know if that, I know that there's an element of that happens today still yet, but it was different times back then, for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Now, whenever you were first putting on shows for Hereafter, like what type of venues are we talking, like Legion Halls and things of that ilk?
I think we were doing a lot of stuff down, this is when Leeds Landing down in St. Louis actually was popping, and there was tons of stuff going on down there. Mississippi Nights was still down there. There wasn't casinos and just parking lots like there is now. It's it's so weird because it's like a ghost town when you go down there now. There's still places down on Leeds Landing, but it's dead. It's so weird. And it was when we were growing up and I was in my teens doing Hereafter, that place was just hopping. It was the place to be. So most of the places we were playing would be Kennedy's, Bernard's Pub. There was a place called Collins Street Station for a short amount of time that we were able to do some shows at, like Boy Sets Fire and stuff like that. That was kind of it starting out, was just a lot of those venues. Hereafter did do some stuff at High Point, so we didn't just stay right in Leeds, but we did High Point and probably, I don't know if we played the Side Door or not, but just kind of venues like that, smaller 200 clubs.
I know a lot of what people have talked about in the past. Unfortunately, I was kind of coming up to this venue way late in the game, shortly before it closed, and that was the original Creepy Crawl. And a lot of what people have talked about in the past are some of the shows that you helped put on at the Creepy Crawl specifically. Would you say that was kind of the majority of your show promotion, or what you might most notoriously be known for nowadays?
I mean, probably. I mean, I did shows all over, so it definitely wasn't limited just to Creepy Crawl, but I would say
sure.
A majority of the things that I did, especially of bands that no one thought where they'd be today, doing shows for the White Stripes and Fall Out Boy and you name it, Postal Service. That was the other thing. I booked Postal Service, a co-promoter with a friend of mine, did it at Creepy Crawl. and like now they're like headlining stadiums. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I know,
So,
like, and even the shows that people used to be able to see there too, it would sound crazy by today's standards. You know, the bills and the various bands that would be on that in such a
yeah.
small venue as well. I don't recall like what the cap was off the top of my head, but I'm sure it wasn't much more than a couple hundred there at the original Creepy.
Yeah, I want to say it was like 250 or 300.
I was going to say that seems right. Yeah, somewhere in that 200 range.
I feel like we pushed it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah,
And
without
like
question. Yeah.
there was that, like it's funny because there was a time we did a kind of a last minute show we did for Dashboard Confessional. Like we did, it was like a matinee show or something weird, like on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And I think we ended up doing like 400 or 450 in there because it was
Oh my
all
goodness.
like really small, skinny girls that were coming out to the show. There were like no dudes like me, except for like a handful that were working it, and like everybody just filed in. It was hilarious. I'm like, if there were dudes coming to this show, there was no way that many people would
Yeah, less mass for sure.
fit.
Less mass.
It
That's
was a
great.
blast though. It was crazy, but like I think that's definitely the like most we ever packed in there was that show, at least for me.
Yeah, I know one of the few shows that I got to catch there was just like an insane bill. I'm pretty confident it was the number 12 Looks Like You, Heavy Heavy Low Low, Genghis Tron, and Fall of Troy.
Oh
And
yeah,
to
yeah,
see like all four of those bands there, and this was like, I want to say 2005.
sure.
So at the start of all of those bands like taking off as well. So it was crazy to see those bands who, equally gaining popularity at a venue so small and intimate. So I think that was like a lot of the appeal of that place too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it kind of
So
gained
line,
that status that you talked about earlier. It was like all these acts that would go on to be more and more popular too. So even I think people would even take a gamble, I guess. I don't know, it sounds kind of funny, but even if they hadn't heard a band, they would go to the Creepy Crawl with hopes of, discovering something new and, potentially that band would go on to be more popular and they could continue to be fans of them.
yeah. I mean that time frame, we're talking like late 90s, early 2000s. Like it was crazy. Like there was just so many bands coming out at that time, and a lot of people were touring, so it was just all happening at once, and it was just kind of new and fresh to everybody, and everybody was kind of figuring out how, when we went along with it. It's crazy looking back on it because like it definitely, when things were happening, we never would have thought some of these bands would be playing like arenas and stadiums, but there's a bunch of them that are, and
Yeah.
it's wild to look back on it.
I'm kind of curious in the bands that traveled through that you were involved with booking. Was there any bands that you kind of saw at the time and you just didn't perceive them, gaining the success that maybe that they have present day? I know that it'd probably be easy to say something like the White Stripes, for example, but
Yeah,
I'm
I
just kind of
mean,
curious. Are there
hell,
other bands?
I'm going to be honest. When I got the call to do the White Stripes show, I had no idea who they were. I'd never heard a single song of theirs. So I did what any promoter that at least has the like brain cell in their head would have done in St. Louis at that time. Is called Jim Utz at Vintage Vinyl at the time because he was like the guru that like. Sorry if my ring's going off, but like he was the guru that like he knew everything about everybody, and he still like I still talk to him today online to this day, and know that he like tries to make time to discover new music and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So he's always had his finger on the pulse of things, and he was like, "This band's awesome. They're gonna blow up. I would definitely book it." I took his word for it, and it was packed. Yeah, they were
Wow.
great. Yeah, it was weird because it definitely they did a lot more. From what I hear, they played Columbia the night before, like I think Blue Note maybe,
Yeah,
and it was like packed there. So they were definitely drawing really big crowds in like college towns at the time.
sure.
But whenever they played like the Creepy Crawl, like it was pretty packed, but like there were it was like 250, so it was at capacity ish. I don't know if it was necessarily sold out. They were just saying how like the Columbia show was just so much bigger the night before, so it was just weird to see like they were basically just really blowing up in the college market, and
Yeah,
every like even like major markets it wasn't hadn't caught up with them yet. So, but I mean like in the grand scheme of things, looking back in their career, like they blew up really fast. They weren't a band very long
sure.
to be as popular as they were, but Yeah,
Yeah.
I never saw it coming that they were going to blow up the way that they did. For sure as hell, My Chemical Romance, I never
Yeah.
in a million years would have thought those guys would have blown up the way that they did. I booked them several times. I mean, Fall Out Boy, like there was something going on. People knew that they're, so I'm not too shocked that they kind of blew up.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're for sure. There were definitely bands that I was really just surprised to see, like that they had pretty crazy careers ahead of them.
Sure. And some of those bands, again, kind of back to the White Stripes comment, it was kind of a good timing too, because it was kind of like in the dying days of college terrestrial radio too. So
Yeah,
I could kind of see how it was kind of right time, right place for them. I don't know that that's so much a phenomenon today with the advance of streaming and what have you,
sure.
but what popularity they gained, they sustained, and I'm sure if they put out another record, it would be a bestseller, if, as far as physical media is concerned, in vinyl pressings, and Jack White's obviously went on to have a legendary career beyond that, producing, having his own label and so on. So,
Yeah,
but I know kind of running parallel to you doing those shows, I think sometimes we get into things based on circumstance. So, you putting on your own shows kind of made way for you to continue booking shows, but also at the same time, you were in a band and trying to advance yourself as a musician. So
sure.
I know a majority of those early days and probably a lot of that time was with Not Waving But Drowning specifically. And I know we had Calvin on the show previously, and we talked a little bit about Not Waving But Drowning. Your involvement with Not Waving But Drowning predates even Calvin as well. So,
Sure.
um,
Yeah, yeah.
didn't
Todd and
that
I
start
are
around 96? Is that about right?
Not Waving started in 98.
Okay, 98.
Hereafter was around 95, 96, 97.
Okay.
And then when we broke up, that's when Todd and I started putting Not Waving together. It's actually, I don't know if I've talked about this in interviews before. I mean, Todd's basically been there since the beginning, but like we had someone else try out vocals first. So like Todd wasn't actually the original like vocalist out the gates per se. So I guess technically you could say I'm the only original member, but like I mean Todd's pretty much been there since we've done anything serious. So,
Yeah.
but we used to have my friend Robbie who was playing with the Love Lost but Not Forgotten guys, but back
Yeah.
when they were called, I think, Drowning Your Image. They went by a different name, and he sang with them for a while. He came out and tried out with us. I don't really want to get into the long story, but unfortunately, he just had some serious mental health issues and took his own life
Mm.
like a couple of years after that.
Oh, my.
But he was our original singer for like a handful of practices, I think, if I remember correctly, like maybe 3 or 4 times we jammed with him, and it just wasn't gelling the way that we were wanted it to. And then when Todd stepped in, I was like, okay, this. It's kind of funny that I didn't just default to Todd in the first place because he was in Hereafter with me, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't really remember what was going on. If he wasn't interested at the time and I had to talk him into it, I don't know. But I'm glad it worked out however it did because
Sure.
like the lineup that we ended up solidifying over the years was, I mean, we still love playing together. So if that tells you anything, 25
Right.
years later, we still love to be around each other. So
Definitely. I think a big thing about you guys, outside of the fact that you guys were all great musicians playing music that people liked, was the stage presence. Like, I know that that's something in particular that I look for whenever I go and watch bands, kind of depending on what type of music they're playing and that sort of stuff. There's, I guess, quote unquote, more appropriate stage mannerisms to have. But with you guys, I would say it's like kind of cutting edge and groundbreaking. I know that those things were happening in hardcore music and those things as well. But I would say it was definitely a part that drew people to you guys, or at least me. I can speak for myself. But I know it was like when I
well,
heard stories about you guys as well, before I ever saw anything that you guys did, a lot of that, contained like, these guys are crazy, man. The guitarist, he's just whipping his guitar around the whole time. And the lead singer, he's getting down on the ground and screaming and rolling around on his back and just going absolutely insane. So I was
yeah,
like, whoa, I got to check this shit out. So I think that was a
well, we
part
were
of, the allure.
yeah, like when we were like growing up and discovering bands like geez, like Snapcase and Refused and stuff like that. Because like I actually like our first band Hereafter, we opened up for Snapcase and Refused at the High Point. So like when we started like seeing bands like that and actually being around them and stuff, we're just like, whoa, like these live shows are intense. Like it was like addicting. Like it was an adrenaline rush because like the band was going crazy, the crowd was going crazy. like it wasn't really anything that we had seen leading up to that. And being in small club shows, it's like that more just like crazy and explosive. Whereas like if you're going to like amphitheaters or larger
Right.
theaters, like it, the energy level may not always be as high, and
Right.
like, so to be a teenager and to be in small clubs, seeing some of these bands like when they're first starting out, we were like, holy crap, like we want to put on a show like that. Because like it blew us away, so we wanted to be able to do that for other people. Hell, it was entertaining, so we're like, yeah, that's we want to do that because it looks fun and we just had
Absolutely.
a blast.
I'm sure like comfortability like with your instruments and stuff too along the way made it a little bit easier to do some of that stuff amidst performing. But
Sure.
I've had these conversations with artists in the past too. It's like even recently, Great Falls, a guest that we had, we talked so much about how whenever it comes to heavy music, like in particular, that's something I'm always looking for is people up there like expressing themselves beyond just standing there like a monolith or something, playing strumming
Sure.
amongst their instruments. There's a lot of emotion that goes into the songwriting. That's kind of like what I expect out of like bandmates or people that I play with as well. I'm just not really big into like the whole just stand up there, play your instruments, and not put some emotion or some feeling behind it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like it's times have definitely changed because there's a lot more like very technical bands out there,
Right.
and like back when we were like kind of like just like starting up, bands like Dillinger Escape Plan were
Yeah.
also like coming out at the exact same time. And I think then, like, obviously if you listen to some of these recordings, you could tell like the playing isn't like as tight as it would be on the recording itself,
Sure.
like at the live shows, like it was pretty sloppy for a lot of bands, including ourselves.
Sure.
But like that was also like part of the scene was just
Yeah.
like getting up there, fucking going off, and having a good time, and that's what it was.
I know that we kind of faced some of this backlash, but things that we did were years after what you guys did. And again, a lot of what happened down in the Farmington area was kind of emulating what happened up in St. Louis. But did you guys like run into like a lot of, I'll just kind of characterize them as political issues where, you would go to a venue and maybe just a certain stigma or something was associated with like, the heavy music. So in the future, you couldn't book those venues, or did you have issues with like, people vandalizing stuff? I'm kind of curious if you kind of dealt with any of those challenges.
Oh, I mean, I can't really think of anything that comes to mind. You mean as far as like if we played a club and they were like, oh, we didn't know you guys were going to be this crazy
Right,
type of
exactly.
thing?
Yes, sir.
I mean, we didn't care. So
I hear
even
you.
if it was, we just fucking did our thing. So
Yeah,
like, even if it was a place where like we didn't belong there. I mean, we opened up. We played plenty of shows we didn't belong at. Like, we opened up for bands like Get Up Kids and Jimmy Eat World early on.
yeah,
Um, and like, but I mean, back then in the '90s, like you could go to a show, there'd be a hardcore band, a punk band, a ska band, a rockabilly band, there anything and everything, all on the
yeah,
same bill. And I love
definitely.
that. I miss it. And I still treat my shows like that. When Not Waving's playing a show later on, like it's gonna be diverse. It's not gonna be four metal bands on
Right,
stage. We've always been passionate about checking out different styles of music, and it's just always been part of us.
for sure. When you guys played that reunion show at Cicero's, I want to say it was somewhere around 2010, maybe.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I recall going to that show, and that even then, yeah, there was an intent with that bill to have some variety there. I would say, like from what I recall, but I might be misremembering because I'm very good about conflating shows together sometimes. But that's the hazard of going to so many, right? But I recall I believe the Disappeared may have played that show
Yep.
on that bill,
Yeah,
but
Disappeared
I would
played.
say
I
that they
think
were the closest to you guys as far as the bands that played, but I know that there was a variety beyond that. So, I can definitely speak to that. That's definitely been a part of your school of thought.
Oh yeah, I think Fister was on that show. They were,
Yeah.
a doom band, obviously, and like McCree, which Pat Baum's band at the time, which is basically, I guess, Daybringer, but without Pat now, right? I
Yeah.
think
Basically. Yeah. It's
so.
all the same people.
Um,
Plus the
yeah,
guitarist, I
yeah.
think. Yeah.
So, and I mean, they were very like melodic and kind of like proggy, but in the sense of like cave-in type proggy type stuff. I think,
Right.
like, so. Yeah, I mean. we've definitely had more diverse bills, but I mean, it's still pretty diverse because we're like a fast, spazzy metal band. Fister's a slow as hell metal band.
Yeah,
Disappeared's like straight up kind of like punk hardcore stuff, and then
definitely.
McCree was, had the post hardcore vibes going on. So
Right.
we still, it just, wasn't four bands that sound like Not Waving for sure.
Definitely. And what I've loved about you guys, even though you guys haven't like played a ton of shows consistently throughout the years, is like it's never say never. You know, you guys have a show coming up here next week. That is, as we are recording. So we're recording here on June 20th, but
Yeah.
I believe it's June 29th that you guys have a
Mm-hmm.
show at Off
Yeah.
Broadway, and you guys are covering some longtime friends of yours,
Yeah.
Zayo. And so I'm really looking forward to what you guys might be having on that set list next week as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like it's kind of funny how it came together. Todd had been like kind of saying for the last couple of years that he's been liking the idea of doing like a cover set, and specifically like with Rick doing like one of the Release the Dog ones, because we, we're pretty passionate about our doggos. So
Yeah,
we like the idea of being able to do something that we can give back to that community
absolutely.
and help stray rescue out. So it's a badass idea that Rick's been doing, and I'm glad he's been doing it. So we've been wanting to do it for a while, but we could just never get everybody on the same page. But it's like working out this year. But yeah, we were trying to think of bands to cover, and we didn't necessarily want to cover anyone that like had already been done already,
Right.
through that before in the past. We had originally talking like we're all huge Faith No More fans, and like we
Yeah.
really wanted to do some of those songs, but like I kind of underestimated how freaking weird timing some of those guitar riffs are. Because like I
Yeah.
love like King for a Day, Fool for a Lifetime, like that era. That's my favorite album of theirs. Like I love Angel Dust and Real Thing too, but like
Yeah.
that album is the one that like absolutely just does it for me every time.
That's
And
cool.
so like we were trying to do some of those songs, and I was like, man, like this is it just wasn't flowing. Maybe if I put more time and effort into it down the line, it could, but like at that time wasn't working. So we were kind of like, yeah, I don't think that's gonna work. So it kind of turned into the idea of like, well, whose music do we know almost as well as our own?
Yeah.
And like Zayo was like the first one that came to mind because we just toured with them so much back in the day,
Right.
and we're kept in touch with them. I mean, we saw them play like every night, and it was, a lot of those songs we just have embedded in our heads. So
Definitely.
we say that, and then when we went to go practice some of these songs, it was like a train wreck at first, but like it's coming together, and we're mainly kind of. I'm not trying to like you know spoiler alert or anything, but we're going to be focusing on songs of the time period of when we toured with them.
That's
So
great.
it's gonna be stuff that came out in the late '90s and early 2000s,
Right. So we're
mostly off
talking
of
like pre-funeral God era Zayo
yeah
stuff.
yeah
Yeah.
pre-funeral and after Splinter. So like basically the Where Blood is Fire, Bring Rest, Liberate, and what's the other one? Self-titled, I guess.
Yeah. There's self-titled
So
on there.
yeah,
Yeah.
so just a handful of songs from those, and basically our favorite bangers. So looking forward to it.
I'm sure you've probably at least checked out some of the Live from the Church stuff that they did recently.
Yeah, I checked out. I haven't sat down and watched the whole thing yet, but I've went through and watched certain songs, and looks like they did a banging job with
Oh
it.
my God, incredible. Like before they put the full length out, I think they just put one of the singles up, and I can't recall which one it is now, but um, I was like, man, this is going to be incredible. I can't wait to watch the whole thing. And
It's cool.
man, they
Yeah.
deliver. I don't know that energy that they bring still, and the accuracy, and the performances, and I think the one and only time I've seen one of them was back in like '05 or '06, and I was just like, this is forever going to be one of my favorite bands, and
Oh
I'm
yeah.
glad to see that they've kept it going over the years as well, and they've stayed pretty true to form as well. It's a pretty rare thing to see over 25 years.
Yeah. I mean, they've definitely progressed, and like Zayo for 25 years ago doesn't necessarily sound like Zayo now,
Sure.
but they're the tightest they've ever been. They're writing killer songs. Like I think all the guys have just like learned what their strengths and weaknesses are, and like what they're able to like do pull out best of themselves, and they just do it every time.
Yeah, they're one of
And
those bands that's kind of like tinkered from album to album. If you would listen to their first album compared to their newest album, yeah, there's certainly a difference, but it's
yeah,
not been one of
it's
those
like
things
slight
that's been
adjustments. Yeah,
drastic. Yes, exactly.
sure.
Exactly, which I have a huge appreciation for. I don't know if it's always a multitude of things. I think as musicians, there's an element of us that, want to progress as musicians and be better, but also people's personal interests and tastes change, and sometimes there's a member change or whatever the case is, and then that can lead to some changes in the songwriting styles and the creative process and
I,
so on. But
well, and we know with Zayo's history, there's
and a
over
few of
time,
those,
there's definitely been a lot of lineup changes.
yeah,
So yeah,
for sure. Yeah, but I'm excited to see what you guys pull out of the bag. It's cool that you guys are kind of targeting that time frame. I know like some of the other bands that are playing, of course, are covering other artists as well. Lion's Daughter, kind of mentioned them earlier, but Rick
yeah,
there. But they're doing Motorhead, which is like a perfect marriage, of course, for them. I
sure.
think Blackwater 64 is doing Thin Lizzy, which actually Thin Lizzy to me is like possibly the most underrated band of all time. I'm a huge Thin
Oh,
Lizzy
really?
fan. Yeah, I love
That'll be
them.
fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jailbreak to me is one of the best rock records ever written. It's
Oh yeah.
probably like definitely top 10, if not Mount Rushmore for me. But
I grew up on
fortunately,
classic rock, so I'm ready for
same,
it.
same. Yeah, that was all my dad ever played. Man, it was
Yeah,
all AC/DC, Van Halen, Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne solo stuff.
sure.
Just all that stuff was always constantly playing. So Danzig, of course. How can you not love Danzig? We got Fortunate Son doing
Oh
that.
yeah.
I'm excited to see old Tony Saputo up there ripping on some Danzig.
It's fun to see us playing with so many friends that we've known for so long up
Yeah,
there. And we didn't even book the show. This is all Rick.
sure, sure.
But it's yeah, it's we're stoked to share the stage with so many friends up there. Nolia is newer. I'm not that
Yes,
familiar with those guys. I know they're
me
doing.
either.
Is it? Are they the ones doing the downside? I think.
They are. Yep.
But I think one of the dudes was in Rusted Skin. At least I ran into like the
I've
singer
heard that.
a few weeks
Yeah, I've
back,
heard
and he
that.
was telling me it's somebody in the band is, and I'm excited to see them because I remember Rusted Skin just killing it back in the
Oh
day.
yeah, Rested
Like I
Skin
think it's
was.
only just one dude, but like you know,
Yeah.
I'm sure those guys. I've heard good things about them, so I'm
I'm
sure
not
I'll.
sure which member from Rested Skin's in that band, but I did know the drummer briefly, Jason. He became the replacement drummer for Dress for a Funeral, and then they kind of started to change their name. I was friends with all the guys in Dress for a Funeral. They were kind of a
Oh, okay,
Potosi band,
okay.
but they played St. Louis somewhat
I remember
frequently.
that name. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were one of the more popular bands, and I'm biased because they're all my friends, but I think one of the best
Yeah.
bands that came out of this area. I'd
Sure.
put Last Flight Home at the very top of that list, but they're certainly in the conversation and not to be forgotten as well out of
Yeah.
this
Definitely.
area. I know that outside of the upcoming benefit show that we've talked about, another big thing in the works, and you guys got a long history with this, is Furnace Fest coming up. So I think, what is this, your fourth or fifth Furnace Fest that you guys have played?
This
Actually,
will be our fourth, which
okay,
we always crack ourselves up because we played three of them like the original run of festivals that they did back then. We did all the ones that like Chad was doing from Take Hold Records because we were actually on Take Hold back in the day. That's what If It's Too Cute was on, and we ended up doing the first three festivals. So I guess it was 2000, 2001, 2002, and I guess it's the middle one. One of them we don't remember playing. Like everyone
wow,
in the band, like we're like we can't remember anything specifically about it. Like it's weird. It's really weird. Like, but
that's
like
wild.
I also know that those shows were in August most of
Yeah,
the time, and we were all every time we played Furnace Fest, we were in the middle of a tour. It seemed like so. Like we we were probably a month deep into a tour and probably just
tired,
worn the
worn
hell
out.
out and like
Yeah,
heat exhaustion and like probably just on autopilot.
I could see it.
Yeah, it's so weird that like it's like I remember the first year vividly. They actually didn't have a lot of like the backstage area like roped off and stuff. So we were like exploring all of Sloss Furnaces, and it was crazy because like we were not supposed to be back there, but we were having a blast just running around looking at all the crazy stuff around there. But like I think the second year on, they made it to where you couldn't just roam around and go anywhere. So we were pretty fortunate to be able to do that the first year and
Right.
kind of have that fun. But and I just remember like some of the bands that were playing before us and after us, like that first year. I think ISIS went on before us of all things,
Wow.
which was yeah. I mean, looking back of it, like we definitely, there's some shows where not waving headline, and then there was other bands on the bill where like, really? Like Coheed and Cambria's one, like we headlined a show down in Juke Joint in Springfield, and they opened up for, we actually had Bloodletting Coheed open up for us, and we were like huge
Wow.
Bloodlet fans too, and we
Yeah.
were just getting into Coheed, so we were stoked to have them. But like looking back on it, it's like, oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, that
Like
is.
they're massive now. But yeah, we did. So we did the three, and then the third one we play. I think the first 2 years we did the main stage, which was the shed essentially, because that's what they're calling it now. And then we did the pond stage the last year. And again, I don't remember a ton of that year, but I do remember that Todd jumped in the pond. And it is not a clean pond. If you've ever
I
been
would
to
I wouldn't
Floss
imagine.
Furnaces, at least back then, I imagine it's probably the same as it was. But yeah, I mean, he didn't end up growing like a third eye or anything like a Simpsons character, so it worked
Yeah.
out. But I just remember a lot of people being like, "No, don't do that."
Uh, yeah.
I
Braver
think he
man
got
than me.
yelled at by some people too. Or, I don't know, whatever. But he's all right. I think he's all right. He's still alive.
Yeah. He seems to be all right.
Yeah.
Putting up all those beautiful pictures of those places he's going. My God.
Oh yeah. I mean,
What was it,
hell,
2 or 3 days
he's on
ago?
an
He was on top
adventure
of a
right
mountain.
now. The
Yeah.
rest of the Zayo songs we're trying to knock out and get tight before he comes back. He's in Banff up in Canada right now.
Okay, I wasn't exactly sure where he was at. I just saw the last picture he put up in the last
Yeah.
few days and looked like a damn postcard, high def postcard. I was like, what the
Oh,
hell's going on
yeah.
here?
It looks like he's standing in front of a damn Bob Ross painting. It's ridiculous.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's
It's incredible,
gorgeous. Yeah.
incredible. So jealous. Yeah, I wish I could travel a little bit more personally, but
Uh,
hoping to scheme up a plan to make it down to Furnace Fest. I've never been to one, and
oh,
I'd like to be. I told Calvin I'll be your guys' merch guy and peddle your goods, and he said the only problem with that is we need merch, and I was like, well, let's figure that part out.
yeah, we got to figure that out. So hopefully we don't wait till the last minute. But the most recent runs of the show or the of the fest have been awesome. The lineups have been crazy.
Yeah,
So it's yeah, it's, I think this year is going to be pretty rad. The lineup's crazy, and
yeah, it's crazy
uh,
this year for sure. I know
yeah, they
that.
might have some like surprises in store since it's the very last Furnace Fest, and we're playing Sunday,
Yeah,
which is the last day of it. So
right.
it'd be interesting to see like what all goes down that day. So it'll be fun.
Well, I know that there's a crazy variety too, for this festival in
Oh
particular. And I don't know if they did this in years past, but they have like the opening Thursday shows that they put on, and the first one sold out so quickly. I think it's the one that I believe Zayo's headlining.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
I don't know if they're. I think Counterparts is
you're
headlining, but
right.
it was like right
Yeah,
on right direct support. Yeah,
yeah, semi main there,
which is kind of
but
weird because everybody's like, "Why in the hell is Zayo
and
headlining?"
the fact that it's Furnace Fest, and yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
nothing
sure they're
against Counterparts, but I mean,
no,
Zayo's always. I mean,
definitely.
I've been listening to Zayo forever, and I'm not the only one.
Well, that sold out so quickly that they actually added another one for Thursday. I don't know if you're already aware of this, but Further Seems Forever
Oh yeah,
is headlining that one, and I know that was a low ticket warning as of early morning yesterday. I haven't checked to see if that one sold out. I'd assume it
I'm
has by now.
I'm pretty sure it's going to sell out. Yeah,
Yeah, so that's crazy that they're. I guess in part because yes, it's the last one too. I'm sure there's a lot of last minute rushes to do things here, but these Thursday pop up additional shows are quite the nice surprise as well.
yeah, it's awesome. They didn't. I'm pretty sure they did not do like pre-shows or anything like that back in the day when we did the original ones. But this is cool, and especially because like I remember when I first saw like the lineup going out with us on it and everything, it felt weird not seeing a handful of bands like Zayo and Further Seems Forever, like not seeing
Yeah,
those bands on there because I know when we played like the original ones back in the day, it seemed like Zayo played every single fucking one of them. They were at every single one, and it just like and no one complained about it because it was Zayo.
right.
So it's like one of those things that it's like it just kind of felt like they were just part of the fest. And same things with Further Seems Forever and a couple other bands I can't think of, but like so for them to be able to like do like a pre-show and still include those bands that everyone's used to seeing on the lineup so frequently, that's I'm I'm stoked that they did that for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very cool wrinkle. Another kind of cool thing about it too, of course, you guys are playing the last day as you mentioned. So you guys get to help kind of send the festival off into the sunset. And so you guys are playing Sunday, which is October 6th, and I guess Under Oath's headlining that day specifically.
Yeah.
Um, But other bands that are playing the same day as you is Blindside, which I was a fan of Blindside back in the day. I didn't even realize that they were kind of like still doing it.
Oh wow.
But they don't really. I think they're from Sweden, so
Yeah.
or thereabouts, and
I
so
don't
they
know
don't
a
really.
ton about them, but I do remember they're from Sweden, and like the people that love them are just super passionate about them for sure.
Yeah, they've been around for quite a while. I'd say like their more prominent stuff's like 2003-ish, but they
Yeah.
were one of those bands that was like, are they a Christian band? Aren't they a Christian band? And I was like, I grew up in a very conservative household, and so there was a period of my life I was only like allowed to listen to Christian music, and so that was one of those ones that I was like, hey, they're supposedly a Christian band, so I was able to listen to them. But yeah, great guys, great music. Not real familiar with anything that they may have done recently, but they're on the bill. No Pressure. They're one of my favorite current pop punk bands. It's got Parker Cannon. Well, they're kind of like a hybrid of pop punk and hardcore.
Okay.
But it's got Parker Cannon from The Story So Far, which they are a very popular current pop punk band. They got a new album dropping actually tonight. So I'll be checking
Okay.
that out. Norma Jean, of course, legendary. That's another one of those bands we kind of talked about earlier. A lot of member changes, so I don't even think there might
No
be one
OGs, man.
original member, right?
No OGs. No,
Yeah, no,
we did
I didn't think
dates with
so.
Norma Jean when they were called Ludacris.
Yeah, I remember that, and old Josh
Yeah.
Cogan was in the band back then too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Like they had a DJ too for like a short period of time, I think. Like
yeah,
we played a show with them in Peoria, Illinois, when they were Ludacris and they had the DJ, and I think eventually they were still going by Ludacris, but got rid of the DJ because
yes.
I
They
remember
did that.
doing a tour with them and Zayo and Living Sacrifice, and I don't remember there being a DJ on the tour.
Yeah, and then
And
close to that time, I think they did that split with Me Without You as well, or shortly thereafter, I should
maybe,
say.
yeah, I don't recall, but it
Yeah,
sounds about the time frame. Because
which
like I think we were I don't know if Me Without You did it or not, but there was a show that we were playing like late '90s with Zayo and Me Without You's on the flyer, but I don't know if they actually played or not, but they were definitely around that time frame.
yeah, and that's a band that from the start of their career to the end of it, it didn't sound anything like what they originally started doing.
Oh
They used to be a lot heavier than what they ultimately ended up with their last albums for sure.
yeah, definitely.
But yeah, you guys have got some pretty other killer acts. Trapped Under Ice is one of my favorite more modern hardcore bands. They're actually really kind of a super group in some
Oh, okay.
respects because the lead singer from Turnstile is their drummer. So, and
Oh,
he's actually a
really?
very good drummer.
I had no idea.
Yep, he's a very good drummer, and I love Turnstile as well. And the lead singer, Trapped Under Ice, is the lead singer of Angel Dust. Justice Tripp, he's a very good frontman. I really enjoy him as well. Yeah, they've been doing it. I think their first demo was like 2007. That's a band that I found out from yeah, all the internet nerds and music nerds are gonna probably kill me for calling this out, but like What CD back in the day, it was like an old torrent site with like exclusive like deep cuts and stuff. And
Oh, okay.
so like I found out about them like very early on, and that was a band that I followed for the longest time. I don't think they
Yeah,
put out an album since like 2017ish, but they've recently
I had
started playing some hardcore show or
I had no
festivals.
idea they were this popular.
Yeah, yeah,
I had no clue, and I saw they were like one of the headliners. I was like, holy crap! Okay, cool.
they're
I've
they're
seen some
solid.
videos that I thought were pretty interesting of them, but I don't know much about them because those guys came out like after Not Waving broke up, and when we
Right.
broke up like the first time around, I like kind of like fell out on like listening to a lot of heavy stuff. I got to a point where like I
I see
just
that.
like to listen to like atmospheric stuff, indie rock, and a lot of podcasts. I did like a lot of comedy and stuff. Like I just got burnt out on music for some reason. I don't really know what it was, but like I got to the point where like listening to bands like Dillinger Escape Plan and stuff like that, it was just like
Yeah,
I early on I loved the sensory input, but then later on it kind of became more of an annoyance to me or something. Like it just was too
yeah,
much.
kind of overwhelming.
So I just got to where I like hardly listen to like any heavy stuff anymore for like a long period of time.
Yeah, I can see that. I
But
kind of had a similar thing when I stopped playing heavy music and I started playing like more indie rock stuff. And
sure,
but I don't know if it was like I was just kind of associating that music with like bad times, which I think that was an element of that. I mean, there's bands that are of my favorite bands that are in that realm that will always be of my favorite bands. Converge is like one of the most important bands to me. Period. Everything that
yeah,
band's about and that they've done and how awesome the people are that are in that band and how much they've helped other artists and, so on.
Can
And
I
I know
tell a
you've got a
couple
history.
stories about those guys? Because
Please
like I
do.
was just thinking about them the other day. Converge is like one of the first like metalcore bands that I ever got into after, say, like Snapcase or something like that. Like
Sure.
I ended up checking out a bunch of Victory bands at first, but like I can't remember who turned me on to Converge, but I got into like Converge and Threadbare and stuff like that all around the same time, and like Cave In, like their early stuff. And I just remember being like, "Holy shit, this Converge band's crazy," because they had like Slayer type riffs, but it wasn't like traditional like death metal stuff.
Right.
Like it was mixed with like hardcore. And Jacob Bannon's like, oh, like he's on another level,
Absolutely.
and his stage presence. There's no one else out there doing it like him, and he's been doing the same thing for as long as I've known that band. Like they were just as intense back then as they are now. And we were lucky enough to do a bunch of shows with Converge back in the day, and like one of the like short runs we did with them, we were lucky enough to be able to go out with them, and I think do like 4 or 5 shows on the Jane Doe tour when Jane Doe first came out. I mean, that's obviously like probably their most well-known album for a reason. Like it's their first record with that drummer, and it was just like you could just tell that there was like a huge chemistry change, like all
Absolutely.
this energy like out of nowhere. And they were already an energetic band, but man, it was just like everything aligned, and it was just like this tornado of chaos. And being able to do like a handful of those shows with those guys during that time period was just amazing. But there's a couple things that they did that like I was thinking about earlier this week that I'm like, man, like that's crazy that they were that fucking cool. So like one of the things was when we played the Fireside Bowl. It was like us, Converge, I think playing Enemy, which would have been some of the guys from Kiss It Goodbye.
Yep.
Um,
Those are the guys in Great Falls. I just talked to them a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and
Good guys.
I don't. I know we did dates with Every Time I Die on that too, but I don't know if they were in Chicago. I don't think they were on the Chicago date. I think they were on like the Ohio shows. But we ended up playing, Fireside Bowl with them, and it was freaking packed. I mean, it doesn't take much at Fireside, but like that place was just packed to the gills. I don't remember what they were charging for shows back then, but it's nothing like they are now. It was like I don't know, probably like $5 or $10 for 4 or 5 band lineup. When we were going out and opening up for bands like that, we would be used to like them handing us like 50 or $100, maybe $150 or something at the most to get from city to city.
Yeah.
And like that night, like they ended up having a door deal with like the Fireside, and like it was so packed, like it was just like a killing. Like so when they got paid out, they literally split it. However many bands were, I think it was just 4 of us. They split it 4 ways. They paid us the exact same amount that they took themselves,
Wow.
and that blew my mind at the
Yeah.
time. And like you know, a lot of people may not even stop to think anything of it, but like that goes to show like what kind of people those guys are. They're
Absolutely.
they were not only just amazing musicians, but they set the bar for like how you treat people, and they're just amazing individuals. There was another time we were actually doing. This is so weird. I feel like when I start talking about this, I feel like the biggest name dropper, but like there's no other way to get around it. So because they're great stories, at least I love hearing people tell stories like this. But when we were doing dates with Papa Roach, and we got like a handful of like East Coast dates. So we were doing like Rochester, New York, Boston, Rhode Island. I can't remember where else, but like 3 or 4 shows. So when we got up to Boston, there was going to be like 1 or 2 days off in between going to the next show. So we were like, okay, well let's look around and see like what's in a drivable distance to what else we can try to hop on. So like we play. I can't remember if the Boston show with Papa Roach was the night before or the night after. But anyways, on one of the days we had off, we um, opened up for Caven's Jupiter release show in
Wow.
freaking Middle East in Cambridge out there,
That's
and
awesome.
and we loved Caven. Jupiter was just coming. I think Jupiter had actually been out like a few months, and they had been touring and stuff on it, but they hadn't played a hometown show.
Yeah.
So they wanted to do like a release, but it had already been out like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. So we're all like, oh my God, this album's amazing.
Yeah.
Like we loved it. Like it was a big change for what they had done prior to that, but like
Definitely.
it was a killer album. It was, I mean, it was phenomenal. And like I just, since I was a concert promoter at the time, I knew a lot of booking agents and people that worked with a lot of these bands. So I was like, I always had the philosophy of like, if you want something, just ask. And the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to tell you no. So, and I still do that to this day. I ask for all kinds of shows that I probably have no business on asking for. And like all the local guys probably hate when I bug them, but it's just how I do it. But I get shows because of it. Like otherwise, like,
Sure.
I wouldn't get any.
Definitely.
And like, I
Answer is
would
always
rather
no
be
until you
told,
ask.
I'd rather be told yes 1 out of 5 times and ask that much than like
Yep.
never ask at all and go nowhere with it.
I
So,
agree.
so I ended up like reaching out to like the agent that handled Caven at the time and was just like, "Hey, we're actually going to be up there doing dates with Papa Roach." I don't know if he like looked at that and was probably like, "Oh hell yeah," or like, "What the fuck? What is this guy calling me about?"
Sure.
But like, like again, one of those things that playing with bands that definitely didn't sound like. And
Sure.
uh, when he said yes, and we were just like, "Holy shit, we're gonna play with." I mean, it wasn't like for us, it was a big deal. For a lot
Yeah.
of other people back then, like Caven's just like a smaller band that would maybe draw like 100, 150 people at places back then, So,
Right.
but like we knew that there was something special with that album, especially, and
Oh,
like
definitely.
we were just like we were more excited to play that show than we were the Papa Roach gigs. It was so funny. Like we're like, why are we like all giddy about opening up for Cave In? But like also seeing those guys play their hometown, like I mean, all these musicians came in from like other bands that we had been listening to and knew, like all the
Sure.
Converge guys were there and stuff.
Absolutely.
And I was going to say one of the things also about Converge that, and that's why I was telling the story about playing the Middle East over for Cave In was Kurt Ballou. Um, he's had a studio back then. I think he's moved it since then, but he had a studio, and I think like either lived in the same house or I don't know, but we basically stayed in the same place where the recording studio was. And he was just like, I got to get up and go to work, and he just like left us in his house, like house studio, and like he just the fact that like he would just trust a bunch of like
Random
dudes,
dudes.
random dudes that was just like, hey, like I can't remember who he asked. Oh, there was a friend of ours that used to live in St. Louis that was living in Boston. And I was like, hey, do you know anyone that might be able to put us up for the night? And she comes back like 10 minutes later and she's like, yeah, my friend Kurt's going to do it. We didn't know it was Kurt Ballou. And
Wow.
like, then like he rolls up and we're like looking up at him like, oh, okay.
That's crazy,
Like,
man.
I mean, those guys are awesome. They were like, I have no idea how much they remember about us at this point, but like,
I'm sure you'd be
they were a
surprised.
huge influence for us, not just musically, but just because they were badass people.
Yeah. The guys in Great Falls remembered you guys because, I was just kind of talking to them about, St. Louis bands. Like they asked
Sure.
me, well, what are some like prominent St. Louis bands? And of course, Not Waiting Madroni was one of the first bands that I mentioned. Like, oh yeah, we played with
Oh,
them.
thanks.
Yeah, we recall them. I was like,
Cool.
really? And they were like, yeah, they were pretty sure that we played some dates with them on the Jane Doe tour. So their recall was like spot on.
Had they been
And
around Great Falls? Had they been around that long?
well, they were in the band that you mentioned earlier. I always forget the freaking name. You just said it.
Playing Enemy?
Playing Enemy. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Two of the three
I
members,
had no
the
idea.
bassist
I'll
and
have
the
to check them out.
guitarist, are both in Great Falls. Yeah, but yeah, really, really good guys. They recalled you guys. I think they had said, I don't know if you guys were on this show, but they had a vivid memory of St. Louis. They had played with the Love Lost Not Forgotten guys. Well,
Yeah.
we're supposed to. It was on 9/11, so they had to cancel the venue and they moved it to the practice space, I guess. And they still
Oh,
had a
sure.
show or whatever version of a show that they could have
Okay.
at the Love Lost but Not Forgotten guys practice space. I think they were like out of St. Peter's, were they not? Like they weren't necessarily in St.
Yeah.
Louis, so I don't know if they
Yeah.
practiced in St. Louis per se, but I know that that's what they had to do on or thereabouts 9/11 on account of like what happened. Everybody was kind of closing stuff down.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. No, that was. I was actually talking to somebody about that the other day, and I can't remember if it was like the same day or the next. I think it was the next day. Like Propaganda were supposed to play
Oh
St.
wow,
Louis, and like because there was so much uncertainty on like what was going on.
Yeah.
They were just like beelining for Canada. They're like, sorry, like we're canceling the rest of the tour. We're getting the fuck out of the States
Yeah.
because like no one knew what the fuck was going to happen.
No,
Like
they
no one
didn't.
knew what was happening. It was just so
No.
it was so unprecedented for that time. Like
Sure.
lot of just a lot of uncertainty going on. And it was weird too because like right around that same time of 9/11, there was a couple months before that. We played that was the only time we've ever played CBGBs.
Oh, really?
And we got to play CBGBs. It was on a Zao tour. It was like us, Zao, Darkest Hour. Um, Mastodon was not on the tour, but they got added to the date. Rich Hall added them, and like
Wow.
that's one of those shows you like look back at and you're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like it was a crazy lineup. Locked in a Vacancy, which I think are still around. They're like a New York hardcore, like metalcore type band. They were on the bill, and I think I just saw them on Instagram like a few months back, so they're still kicking, I think. But yeah, it was just like a crazy lineup. But like we played CBGBs, and then like a couple of months later that happened, and I remember like watching the TV, and like we ended up staying. Jeff's sister, she was always like super awesome, like the big sister that like would take care of us, like whenever she'd come out and see us on tour.
Yeah.
She'd travel out and see us occasionally, and she ended up putting us up in the I think it was like the Hilton of all places, like across the street from the World Trade Center.
Oh,
And we
wow.
stayed there, and we're just like we're in the middle of everything at that
Yeah.
point. Like that place is like it's just hopping. So that was like a wild experience to do that. And then like when 9/11's happening, I'm at home watching TV. Somebody that has a camera goes into like the front area of the Hilton, and I see like I can make out like where the piano was and like all this stuff, and it's just like there's just you know it's
Yeah.
just chaos, and like seeing it in shambles, and like with all the soot and all the stuff
Yes.
that was going on. It was a strange experience to be able to be like I was just there like weeks ago, and that place is just like demolished now. It's wild. It's weird. It was a weird time.
Yeah.
And like 9/11, like we like not waving. I think we were just like I don't know if we broke mirrors or something on tour, but we just had horrible luck when it came to like labels because we had three different label situations on the table, and they all fell apart at some point. And like the last one that probably would have been the one that worked out for us was with Century Media. I think
Oh,
Steve
wow.
Joe was the A&R guy that we were talking to at the time because he was like he was working with bands like Shadows Fall and stuff like that back then. They had us out there. We talked to them. They hooked us up with tickets to see Shadows Fall like at the House of Blues, and everything seemed to be going well and progressing. We had a lawyer looking over the contract. 9/11 happened, and as soon as that hit, like they just pulled all contracts off the table and said we're not signing any bands for the time being. We don't know what the hell's going to happen. So like I think that was probably part of the frustration of why Calvin and Jeff also like decided to quit on that open hand the Stay Forward tour that we did
Yeah.
because like we had our hopes up and let down so many times with the whole record label thing.
Sure. I
If
could
we
see
had
that.
like support from a label and would get put on tours and stuff like that, I think things could have definitely progressed even more for us. I mean, considering like what we have achieved just DIY on our own,
Yeah.
like
Very
looking back
impressive.
at like I actually have a file where I kept every single show that we played, and like
Wow.
every now and then like somebody be like, oh, did we play with so and so, and we'll pull it up and look at it. But like it's wild seeing some of the lineups we played and the bands we
Yeah.
played with and the venues and stuff. Like, and we were not signed to a label, well, other than Take Hold, but it was very DIY back then,
Yeah.
even that, and had like no support that way. I for the most part, I booked our own tours. We did not have a booking agent. We there were some tours that we worked with agents and stuff, but like I did most of it. So if we would have had like some support behind us, like who knows what could have happened. But you know, it's
Sure.
that's in the past.
A whole what if thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, you can't really dwell on that kind of stuff.
No,
But
you can't. It doesn't do any good, and you can only, look forward to the future and try to do whatever you can to be a success going forward. And I think that pivots nicely into kind of what you're doing more modern day, more actively, of course, and that's the two hands, one engine stuff. I know, you did some things in between for sure, but obviously ambient soundscape type stuff, like what led you kind of down that path? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, it's definitely a total departure from what I did in the past with Not Waving for sure. I, for the longest amount of time, had been wanting to eventually maybe try to do some sort of solo project, like a home studio project type thing. And I'd been wanting to do it because, like, when after the band broke up, and I'm working full time jobs and getting married, and then we start having kids. So, like, when we're starting to, like, kind of you know create a family, and that's becoming the priority, we just kind of like really sorry, I lost train of thought here for a second.
Well, I can speak acutely to that too as well. I was active in the music scene, and then I kind of did the same thing, kind of settled down, had a family, and found myself like a desire to create still.
Oh,
So whether that was through podcasting or just doing my own home studio recordings as well. So, I would imagine you probably had a similar itch.
yeah, so that's what I was going to say, was that I still wanted to do something, but I knew that, like, doing a full four-person band and trying to juggle everyone's schedules and stuff wasn't going to be feasible, probably, to the
Sure.
extent of what I wanted it to be. And with a solo thing, you can kind of just do whatever the hell you want. So
Exactly.
that really appealed to me, even though the idea of performing solo didn't necessarily appeal to me. That took some time to kind of get on board with that. But
Sure.
but I knew that I wanted to, like, at least try to create music just by myself for a while. And I wasn't sure, like, what I wanted to do, because I mean, I grew up and, like, I used to, like, loop stuff and play to loops when I was a kid, but there wasn't, like, looper pedals and stuff back then. I had, like, a Casio keyboard where you could hit, like, the loop button on it, and it would record like 4 seconds or something crazy. So I had to do something really fast and, like, capture it. And I would just do a loop on the damn keyboard and play along to that. So, like, I had always kind of, like, messed around with weird stuff like that, with creating loops and just kind of painting over the base of whatever I've created from that. But, like, it just, I could never figure out, like, what direction I wanted to go with it. And there was one day I was like, I don't even know, like, how I came across it, but I was, like, looking on YouTube and started going down this, like, rabbit hole of, like, tape looping
Yeah.
and amulets, which Randall, he does the amulets. He's been doing it for, I don't know how long, but he's been doing it a while now. And he's really the thing that got me into wanting to play ambient music and to play like experimental stuff, and just kind of go down this strange hole of, like, hey, you don't have to just use a guitar or a keyboard to create sounds. Like, you can create sounds with many things. And, like, um, the way he was able to create tape loops and just kind of, like, meld everything together very chaotically but very beautifully at the same time, it really grabbed me and was like, this is kind of interesting. And I love the fact with, like, ambient, that it's like there's not a lot of structure to it. I'm a very structured person when it comes to writing music in the past. Like,
Sure.
I so to do this was very, very different, but very liberating at the same time. Like, it was really
Sure.
kind of nice to, like, throw structure out the window and just be like, I'm going to create textures and tones and sounds that meld together, and sometimes they meld really well, and sometimes maybe not, but it's going to create something regardless. And I just really, something about that intrigued me. So I ended up, like, finding his stuff and, like, finding out that, like, he got into it through, I think the guy, I'm probably going to butcher some names, but I think it was like Alessandro, which is the guy in Nine Inch Nails. I can't remember his last name, but he used a 4-track, like, on a Nine Inch Nails tour, where he would record, like, a single note on each track, and then use the faders to kind of, like, bring it up and you're running the 4-track through like various effects like reverb or something, and like essentially you're using the 4-track as an instrument at that point,
Mm-hmm.
which Amulets also does. And I was just kind of like, I never thought about it that way, and I never like, I mean, it's such a simple concept, but like it wasn't created for that purpose. So a lot of people don't think about it that it can be used that way. But I was just like,
Sure.
I was blown away by it, and so I started kind of. I had a 4-track, an old Tascam 4-track that I'd had since I was a teenager, and I'm a pack rat when it comes to like music gear stuff. So like I held on to it all these years. It just sat in a box, and like here I am, like back in 2018, pulling out this like 4-track tape recorder that I have, blowing the dust off of it, being like, let's see what I can do with this. And like I still use it. Like I've definitely kind of fallen back more into the guitar for the 2 hand stuff as I've
Yeah.
gotten along. But like I could see messing around with the 4-track stuff even more down the line as I have time. But um, the more comfortable I've gotten in it, I've just realized like I'm a guitar player, so that's going to be the core of this project,
Sure.
no matter what. Even though I was trying to like dive in to do things like synths and doing the 4-track, using that as an instrument, but like I knew that I just knew that like guitar had to be like the thing that brought it all together, you know.
Sure. Sure.
And like it's really kind of like caused me to have a new kind of passion for playing too from it all.
That's great.
um, yeah, I don't know. It's like I get a lot out of it. It's strange because like ambient's one of those things people either get it and they love it, or they just think I'm fucking crazy because like
Yeah.
because it's not like necessarily a commercial type style music that a lot of people are
Yeah.
like driving around listening to.
Sure.
You
Sure.
know, it's like not like it's not like you hear like Brian Eno on like The Point or anything. So
Right. Right.
I don't know. I just there's something about it that like once I started seeing how these guys created stuff and the freedom they had to experiment and
Yeah.
just create tones, and it's like also not necessarily stuff that you can recreate either. It's stuff that's like very spontaneous in the moment. And you know, part of that is kind of a bummer that it can't be recreated live, but like
Yeah.
I can create other things live that I won't be able to recreate again either. So
Sure.
it's I feel like it all evens out in the end. Yeah, it was just something about, I guess, like as far as I'm concerned, like no rules. Like it was
Yes.
an open playing field.
Yeah, I can see that
I'm
definitely.
sure other ambient musicians, some of them are different because some might be classically trained, so they probably have a much different look on it than I do. But I kind of take an old DIY punk look at it. That's kind of how I look at it.
There's nothing wrong with
So
that. I think maybe like the allure of it too, at least for me, like I've gotten into ambient stuff too, and I like record some of that like privately at the house I have in the past, not for like everybody's consumption, just because it's something I've woodshedded. I think like the at least for me, the appeal of it is kind of like chasing an idea and just kind of living in the moment of what might feel right coming next. And
sure.
sometimes that produces great results, sometimes it doesn't. But at the end of the day, it's liberating. It's like you're kind of lifting a weight off your shoulders creatively in some respects. So I think that's at least a huge allure for it for me personally.
Yeah, it's a big stress reliever for me. I know that like there's times where if I was like feeling like really anxious about something, if I went downstairs and kind of started messing around with music, one I could get lost in it very easily. I can
Oh
go
yeah,
from spending 10 minutes on a song to 4 hours on a song out of nowhere
absolutely.
and kind
Yes.
of just like lose track of time.
Yes.
It's like great and it's not great. It just depends on
Yes.
what's going on that day.
Especially if you got a family, it gets not great
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
It's like,
for
where's
sure.
dad?
But
He got lost for like
yeah,
4 hours.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's happened to me for
It's
sure.
but like when you're able to do that and it's not like screwing up the flow of everything else in your life, like it's pretty awesome. Like I love being able to, like I just spent 4 hours on this. Like where the hell did time go? It's just
Sure.
it flies by
I
sometimes.
call it time traveling because
Yeah,
like you go in and you get so lost in the sauce and the process, like, and then before you know it, it's dark outside and you went in, the sun was coming up. It's good to have those opportunities and have that support system that allows you to do that though too. So that that's one thing I gotta tip the hat to the family. Whenever I'm like, Daddy wants to make some
yeah,
music, everybody's pretty respectful of that time. Not that I pull
yeah.
that
It's funny.
card constantly.
There was one time I remember. It wasn't that long ago. Sometime last year, where like I had been recording during the day, and we had decided we were going to go out like and eat or something at nighttime. It's like on a Sunday or something. I got done, and like we all get in the car and we pile in there and we're driving. And the kids were being obnoxious like normal and being loud and crazy. And I think like normally like on a Sunday evening, like at that point, I would probably be completely exhausted and a little irritable and be like, "Come on, guys, like stop." Miles was having like a meltdown, and like that's my youngest son. I just remember being like so chill and relaxed
Yeah.
that like
Yeah.
I was able to calm him down fairly quickly because like I was super calm to begin with, and
Right.
like him freaking out didn't like trigger me or freak me out or anything. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was just like I was like, wow, I'm like that's crazy to see like how relaxed and composed I become after doing that for a few hours and whatnot
Yeah.
to dealing with like stressful situations like with kids being loud and stuff in the back. Like yeah, it didn't bother me at all, and I was just like, wow, like I can handle like situations that would be a little stressful. Like, I mean, let's be real, kids are always going to be like kind of
Yes.
crazy and stuff, but like,
Absolutely.
but it just the ability for me to do that and then just be like so chill about everything. I was like, God, I wish I could just be like this all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
speak to that as well. It's kind of funny, those moments that you think that are normally would be triggers, if you will, and if you get those times to kind of like get away and do whatever to creatively flex, it makes a difference in the world. I can speak to it. Podcast doesn't scratch the same creative itch, I will say, as playing music, but it definitely scratches enough of one, and being able to talk about old memories and stuff with folks, too, and
Yeah.
that definitely helps things out. But I will say, like doing a weekly podcast or recording a weekly podcast certainly helps on some level
Oh
as
man,
well.
I like I love music and I love like the community of musicians and stuff like that, but I think stuff like this is just as important. Being able to hear stories about like what they've been through, and like I
Yeah,
just recently went to like a book event with Michael McDonald and
I
Paul
saw that.
Reiser of all
Very
people.
interesting.
And I love like I grew up on classic rock, so like I love like a lot of different bands, but like my wife
Absolutely.
and I totally got into this like rabbit hole of like Michael McDonald stuff
Yes.
like the last year or so. So we like really got into like some of the Steely Dan stuff he was on, and
Yep.
then of
Christopher.
course, yeah, the Christopher Cross stuff for sure. We're like, man, I'm gonna go listen to this dude just tell stories, and like to me, I almost get more excited about that than like going and seeing him play in a live show. Like I just love hearing the crazy stories. Like he was telling
Yeah.
stuff about like opening up for uh, I don't even remember. Was it Tina Turner? I think he said he was going out opening up for Tina Turner. It was like his first solo tour or something.
Yeah.
And like just hearing stories like that and like hearing
Right.
how like they would get heckled or something or have to stop a show early because the crowd hated them or it's crazy hearing stuff like that. But it's like it
Yeah.
also makes you realize like even a freaking legend like Michael McDonald
Yeah.
has been told get the fuck off the stage before.
Right. Right.
you know?
Absolutely.
So it's I don't know. It's just something about that I find really interesting. Just being able to hear like
Definitely.
everybody's experience.
I saw
So
that he was on. I'm a big fan of like Rick Beato. He's one of the best unsung producers. I mean, he's become popular over the last few years because of his
yeah,
podcast or whatever. But he had Michael Badano on there recently, and
sure.
he asked him if he had ever seen the SCTV skit with Rick Moranis, and if he was
Oh,
familiar with it. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's pretty funny. It's about him doing
no,
the vocal part on Christopher Cross's song. Rick
I got to see
Moranis
that.
plays
Yeah.
him in the skit, and so it's
Okay.
like they're in the studio, and Rick Moranis just walks in and sings that part, and it's just like and walks out. So it's like
Yeah.
a 10-second skit, but it's hilarious because he's got just such a
It's
little
probably accurate too.
appearance in there. I'm sure it probably is. And then he goes on to talk a little bit more so about it. I know there's a clip like out on Instagram, just with that little segment in there, but
Yeah.
it's funny to, years later reflecting back, hear these guys talk about, in the time, them seeing these skits and them being parodied and that sort of thing. And he
Yeah.
seems like a really well-rounded guy. Like he seems like to have a very great attitude about all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to say shocked, but I don't know, like, Doobie Brothers was really huge in my house when I was a kid. I didn't
Sure.
even really understand like his impact and his involvement with so much other stuff
Yeah.
over the years until I got older and became more of a student of music in general and music history. And,
Yeah.
I've got an all new appreciation for that guy without question. Excellent vocalist as it is, but his piano playing as well, man. Come
Oh
on.
yeah.
Incredible.
He's amazing.
Incredible.
The thing that really shocked me when I was listening to him talk was like he would start to talk about like a musician or somebody that he was working with or doing a session with or something, and he would always like go out of his way to compliment that person and say something nice about them
Yeah.
before he went into the story.
Yeah.
And I'm like, a lot of people don't do that.
No.
And for someone as successful and big as he is, I mean, let's face it, a lot of people that are that successful are not nice people. I mean, some are, but like, there's a lot of assholes in the industry.
Sure.
And
A lot of
I
egos.
just kind of assume that someone like him that's like loaded and has so much like
Yeah.
experience in the past that he's probably not the most approachable person. But holy crap, he seems like he is. I mean, I'm sure he can be a dick if he wants to be a dick, but like
Sure.
overall, the guy just seems like a super cool dude.
I
He's
agree.
like somebody's grandpa up there playing piano, rocking the hell out.
Yeah, for
He's
sure.
just loving life, you know. He loves playing music, and like you can tell, he wears it on his sleeve.
To tie two things together that we've talked about, 9/11 and ambient music, I have to ask you, have you ever checked out the disintegration loops by chance? Ring a
Yeah,
bell? Yeah.
yeah. After I checked out Amulets, like I of course wanted to check out like a bunch of other ambient musicians, and actually, my friend Russ from Zayo, he's really into ambient stuff as well. So there
Okay.
were a couple people that like I would be talking to, and like he like I turned him on to like the kind of like indie DIY unknown kind of like weird experimental ambient scene of some of the newer artists that I was finding, and then like he was turning me on to all kinds of like ambient artists that had already been established and been around for a while. And like William Basinski was one of them.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he'd turned me on to stuff like Lossel, Biosphere, um, stuff like that. John Hopkins, I think, even. But like he turned me on to all this stuff, and I was like checking it all out. I'm like, oh my god, all this is stuff is amazing. But I'd kind of known William Basinski a little bit already because of just the label that he works on, TRL. Because I've always known them to like. I mean, they put out some hardcore stuff, but they put out indie rock stuff. They put out like post rock. They do a little bit of everything. I didn't really know of the disintegration loops until I started getting into like ambient, and then I did check that out, and I became a fan of his work immediately
Sure.
because there's something very different about it than anybody
Yes.
else, you know.
Yes.
So plus he was like using tape loops when he was creating that. I didn't realize it, but like William was like he didn't really start getting popular until he was already in his 40s.
Yeah.
Like he was a musician, and he did like more kind of maybe I don't know a lot of his early stuff, but I know he dabbled more in kind of like industrial goth kind of
Yeah.
stuff, and he did some singing as well, which he doesn't do on his ambient stuff, but
Right.
that I'm aware of. It was just crazy to think that like man, this guy created this from like old loops that he had done earlier in his
Right.
career, and then decided to make something out of them. When he was in New York, and then I guess the whole story with that is like he had wrapped up and finally finished putting the album together, and it was that morning when 9/11 happened, so he had
Yes.
like friends come over to like listen to the album, and they're all like listening to it while they're watching that all
Yes.
go down. So it was like kind of, and it's a very melancholic album for
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
but like it's a very dark album, but there's a lot of beauty in it. So
Right.
for them to like watch that out the window when that stuff's going down,
Yes.
um, I'm sure he was probably had all kinds of feelings going on at the time. But
Yeah.
it's I mean it's known as one of the more well known ambient albums out there. I mean, heck, I think it's in the memorial for 9/11 even, or like a museum or something up there. I think that they've got
Yeah.
it displayed somehow. I don't know how, but I know it was like a part of that. And yeah, he's a huge influence on me, and which is even weirder that I got to open up for him the second time we ever played out live.
Oh, wow.
It was
I didn't
really
realize
weird.
that. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it was crazy. It's weird how it all kind of came together. But I did that and I was like, crap, what do I do now?
Yeah,
like second
yeah.
show in. I'm like, I've already played with like one of my biggest influences. It was
Wow.
weird. Yeah, he's awesome. He's great.
I wasn't like super familiar with the like. I felt like I was at least had a decent topical knowledge of things ambient. That is until a few years ago, some friends, some of the guys from Just for Funeral, had turned me on to that and kind of told me the story. And knowing that he literally was in New York and in the background, was the Twin Towers falling and the events and all the post
Yeah,
chaos as he was literally wrapping up the album that day. And tapes decaying in general, if anybody's ever, heard that cassette tapes, I know we're probably like dating ourselves, if you will, but they are making a bit of a comeback, folks.
yeah,
But, cassette tapes decaying already sound like pretty wild and warbly, and as it is anyways, but he kind of like leaned into that element, and knowing, all the lives that were lost on that day and everything, it adds to like the drama of the listening experience, knowing that things were being wrapped up like literally as these things were happening. They were listening to it. It was in the
sure.
background. It definitely adds to like the ominous nature of everything. So once I
And
was
I
kind of like
think some of
smartened up to all of that, it definitely had a much greater impact on me for without question.
yeah, I think I think he took some pictures, and that's part of the artwork as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't really, like I said, I didn't really discover that album until like more like 6, 7 years ago. But I didn't realize the relationship it had with 9/11 so
Right.
closely until then. So it's yeah, it's a remarkable album. He's got other stuff too that's great, but like obviously
Sure.
that's kind of what he's known for.
You mentioned the name earlier, of course. That's Brian Eno, and that of course is like one of my absolute favorite musicians of all time. I
Sure.
think he's great. He's iconically and notoriously done work with David Bowie. He's had his own stuff as well.
Yeah.
Worked with other bands in the past. He was kind of like a part of that glam rock boom. Again getting back to our
Sure.
classic love of classic rock and stuff,
Yeah.
Roxy music and stuff like that. He's just an incredible musician, and of course he creates like awesome soundscapes. But he's also got songs like Needle. Is it Needle in the Camel's Eye? That's like a more iconic like '70s rock song from his
Oh
solo
yeah.
stuff. So people like might recognize that he infamously was somewhat involved with like the very loose David Bowie biopic, The Velvet Goldmine of the '90s as well. Wrote
Sure.
some of the compositions for that too. So I'm a big Brian Eno fan, and I
Oh
assume
yeah.
you are as well.
I mean, as a producer, he's worked with so many people.
Absolutely.
People don't even realize like
Slow dive.
stuff that he was involved with. So, but
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's crazy. Huge influence. Like my wife actually listened to him a lot more than I did early on. Like I'm sure my dad had records and stuff, but it's one of those things that like I've listened to on and off over the years for a long time. But like when I started realizing like, oh, this ambient stuff is something that like I resonate with it now. Like something about it like I connect with. Like he was obviously a go-to, and I can his
Yeah.
catalog's pretty massive, so I had
Oh yeah.
plenty stuff to check out on and get interested in, and so getting to explore his catalog, when I was getting into that stuff was pretty exciting because the guy's done so much stuff, and it's all very different. Like he doesn't have a lot of work that sounds alike.
Sure. Yeah, I feel
So
like I was kind
some
of like
people might argue that all ambient sounds alike, but that's bullshit.
I agree for sure. Yeah, there's definitely parts and pieces of ambient music that have stuck with me over the years. I consider myself a fan of all music. I don't subscribe to the theory that like one genre sucks. Now, don't get me wrong. There are definitely genres that I like way more than others, but I always feel like I'm a very firm believer that there's a exception to the rule. So like I would say like generally I'm not like a country fan is would be a good example, but there's all kinds of country artists that I do like, and usually leans toward like more folky or outlaw country and that sort of stuff. But there are like more modern day people that I would put classify as country. Like Casey Musgraves or Sturgill Simpson. Like those people, I enjoy their
Sure.
music. Outside of ambient music, and I know you're in a hardcore band and have liked hardcore bands in the past. Like, what are some genres maybe that folks wouldn't suspect that you're a fan of?
I don't know. Like I would say kind of like that folky, like again, like kind of like you. I'm not into like a ton of country music, but like I've really kind of gotten into some more of like the Americana type stuff
Yeah.
these days. And like there's actually a little bit of a overlap with like some Americana bands and like ambient. Like I did a show with this guy William Tyler that's on Merge Records. That I mean, his stuff's like very country feeling, but like he also has like an ambient vibe to his stuff too, and he all of his stuff's like instrumental. So he does a lot of like jamming and improvising live, and the guy's just like he just creates beautiful music on the guitar. So like I've kind of like have learned to discover some stuff in that realm that I never probably would have checked out before.
Sure.
And like he works with a pedal steel guy called Kyle Schneider that like I'm obsessed with, and Kyle's like amazing, super nice dude. I hope to do more shows with him down in the past, but or in the future. I don't know, like maybe that genre. Because like I kind of look at it and like who's like sitting around thinking like what genres does Justin listen to? I just don't know.
Well, sure, but I think it's
Um,
always kind of like good to like destroy stereotypes. I mean, the world
I mean,
still
I
operates on
listen to
some
everything.
level of judging a book by its cover, if you will. So,
Yeah, I
I
definitely. I mean, I definitely have never just solely listened to like just hardcore bands and
right,
ambient stuff. Like some of the stuff I'm really liking right now is there's this band called Salt, like SAULT, and it's like a collective. I think they're overseas. I don't know a ton about them, so if I speak wrong about it, it's just because I'm an idiot. But it's like very soulful, kind of like in the like R&B hip hop vibe, but like it's all like live instruments and just amazing singers, and like I don't know how many people is in the collective. It's a lot of people from what
yeah,
I hear, but like I don't know how they have that many people in a group and consistently kick ass, but like
right,
all their stuff's amazing. Like I love their stuff.
interesting,
A lot of people probably just wouldn't have thought that I like ended up completely just stopped listening to like metal music and just going straight like indie rock. Like I really
sure,
went down like a huge rabbit hole of like bands like Midlake and Grizzly Bear,
yeah,
and of course I've like loved Radiohead forever too and stuff like
sure,
that. But like yeah, I mean I didn't listen to heavy stuff for years. I just got into bands like that, and
sure,
I got into like a lot of like I guess it would have been called um, like post hardcore or post rock like instrumental stuff. But like
definitely,
back in the day, we just called them instrumental bands. Like they didn't have
sure,
a post tag to it.
right,
Um, so like I mean back then people would probably be a little surprised because like they're just think that I would only listen to crazy screamy shit. But now it's a little bit more common to for both genres to overlap a little bit.
yeah, yeah,
Um, Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've like when I was a kid, I would listen to like growing up. I would go from like we're talking like early on. Like I grew up on like all the top 40 shit. So
right,
like
same,
like I was into like Criss Cross and like Roxette and like
yeah,
Jesus Jones and
yes,
just keep going and going and going. And like and then I got into like Prince. So like I think like Diamonds and Pearls, like new Prince of the New Power Generation was like kind of coming out like it was like probably like early '90s, and like then all of a sudden like I hear Nirvana for the first time on a college radio station. It wasn't even on like a major radio at that point,
yeah,
and it was like smells like Teen Spirit. Like they just dropped that single,
right,
and I was just like, what the fuck is this?
yes,
And then because like it was nobody was doing it like that back then, at
for
least on a
sure,
commercial level, and it was just
for
like blew
sure,
my mind. And like and then Lollapalooza happened. I started getting into bands like Rage Against the Machine and Tool and Fishbone and
yeah,
Nick Cave, and I mean all over the place. I mean the thing that was great about those tours back then was they were very diverse, and like you would get artists like Nick Cave mixed in with like Tool, and like now it would seem like a weird combo, but back then like it was just what everybody did. It was like everybody was kind of under this alternative blanket, and they just kind of everybody did their own thing, toured together. I mean, hell, I even think My Bloody Valentine was on one of the Lollapaloozas,
yeah, I believe
and
so, I believe so,
but like no one gave a fuck about him back then.
sure,
No one cared about My Bloody Valentine.
yeah.
I don't think people really started caring about him much until after they broke up, and now they're like
I
considered
think
like
I think Lost in
icons.
Translation did a lot for him.
Yeah, true.
Kevin Shields did that. whole soundtrack. So, and there was several My Bloody Valentine songs on there. So I know that's how I'll have to
That's a
say that's
great
how I found
soundtrack
out
too.
about personally. I
Yeah,
started getting in indie film at the time, and started watching movies that my dad didn't show me, finding movies for myself and renting
sure.
VHSs and just taking a gamble on stuff. Seeing the name Sofia Coppola was, well, she's got to be related to, Francis, and big fan of his movies, obviously. So, historic Coppola family, gave it a shot. I think that's, like the first movie of hers that I'd seen. And I enjoyed the soundtrack. That was just a part of a boom of movies that I saw. Like, if I saw a band on a soundtrack and I liked them, I like went down a rabbit hole and probably like used LimeWire or BearShare and like destroyed my family computer downloading, all of their music.
Sure.
I had a similar thing happen. A stupid movie, but teen angsty thing. I was a teenager when all of this shit was popping off. So, Girl Next Door with Emile Hirsch. The Echo and the Bunnyman Killing Moon song was on there, and I'm like,
Oh
I need to know more about this because
yeah,
this sounds amazing. So I got into Echo and the Bunnymen as a result of that movie.
yeah,
But
excellent.
that's the way I've discovered a lot of music is actually through movies, because I think I got a little bit more obscure with my movies before I did with my music. But my dad did show me a lot of bands, when I was younger, that I probably wouldn't have liked otherwise had it not been for him showing them to me. He was a bit of a musician himself and had the opportunity to play like Illinois State Fair, like they opened up for Huey Lewis and the News, like when they were
Oh
popping
damn,
off and
that's
shit.
awesome.
You know,
Yeah.
so I think it was a
My
little bit
dad
extra
was really
sports.
supportive. He was a huge like music fan too, and like he. It's funny because like he like really got behind like my hobby at the time. I
Right,
call it hobby, and like
right,
he was just like super passionate about it, but like about supporting me and wanting to see me like just grow with it. But like he no musical like I've never seen a guy play a musical instrument in my life. And it's so weird, but he was just very into music. So I love that because like he turned me on to like so much stuff that I probably wouldn't have checked out. And like my dad's 100% responsible for me checking out Jeff Buckley. Like he was which you know is one of my favorite artists of all time now, but like when I was a
yeah,
teenager, he was touring, and KC was kind of like loosely promoting the shows at the Sheldon.
yeah,
And like that album had just came out. Like not a lot of people knew who the hell he was,
sure,
and I didn't know who the hell he was. And my dad had heard some of his stuff on the radio and was like, "This guy's really cool. I think this guy's going places." And he's like, "I think you should check it out." For some reason, he couldn't go to the show,
mm-hmm.
so he made my mom take me and some friends from high school.
Wow,
Which like the whole thing is like really weird. It's something we never like. My mom never took me to shows alone with my friends, and my dad not go. Like my
sure,
dad
sure,
always went. So like it was. I don't know exactly the situation, but like he must have had to work or something, or worked extremely early, maybe. I don't know, uh, but they were doing like buy one get one free tickets and stuff because it wasn't selling.
mm-hmm.
And so he ended up buying tickets. And like a kid back then, like if your parents are going to say like, hey, do you want to go down to and see a concert, it
The
doesn't
answer is
matter who's
yes,
playing, you're going to say yes to it. so
absolutely,
so I was like, okay, cool, let's try it out. And like, and
yeah,
I was actually played bass in a funk band for a little bit, like before starting up like Not Waving stuff, and like just some friends like in high school together and stuff. And
yeah,
like I think a couple of those guys from that band went down there with me. And I don't remember. I feel like we took a group of people, but maybe it was just like 4 or 5 of us.
sure,
It's like for my mom to take us down to the Sheldon and see Jeff Buckley. It was like on fucking like Tuesday night or something.
that's incredible.
Um, like we had no idea what was in store. Like we had no clue that we were just gonna sit down and like shortly after just be floored by this guy's talent.
Yeah,
He did like this 5 minute like a cappella version of Hallelujah, and
oh,
like I remember it to this day. I mean, there was no instrumentation whatsoever. He just went up there and just dominated that microphone for 5 minutes with his voice.
wow,
And I had goosebumps, and I was a teenager that had no idea what the hell I was experiencing at the time. Like, I mean, like I knew that I was like, damn, this guy's voice is fucking crazy,
that's incredible.
but
Yeah,
I had no idea that like I would grow to like love that dude's music as much as I have. and especially coming out of that experience of getting to see him live, because like he passed away shortly after. It was like probably a year or two
I
after
was going to
seeing him
say he
live.
had to have passed out
Yeah,
shortly, or passed away shortly after you saw him, because, man,
yeah. He hadn't even put the second record out yet. So like,
wow,
yeah, it was just Last Goodbye was the full length that was out at the time. Getting to see him live is definitely like a pinnacle show for me.
sure,
Like a highly influential, like that changed how I thought about
yeah,
stuff for sure. And seeing the talent that dude brought on stage was, I don't think I've seen anything else like it since then. It was
yeah,
crazy. So like my dad was solely instrumental for like pushing me and telling my mom to take me down to that.
that's
But like he
awesome.
turned me on to tons of other bands too. But that's the one that always comes to mind because I'm just like, wow. I had no idea like how lucky I was to see him live at the time
Yeah.
that it was happening. You know, so
This is always
it's
kind of a
definitely
funny thing. I can kind of relate to that. Like somebody I would have probably never have gotten into personally. This guy named Denny Carell, and I call him
okay.
like the Christian version of Michael McDonald. Like
Okay,
very fantastic singer, was kind of like a hired gun in many respects. He actually was in a rock group in the '60s. He was the lead singer of Blues Image. They didn't really like pop off or anything, but in the '70s he like converted his career over into contemporary Christian music, which was starting to be a thing, with the advances of like, the Christian broadcast networks and all that other stuff. So he started to pop off in that world. But that's literally like the very first song I ever learned to play drums to. My dad's put on a Denny Carell record when I was 12,
sure.
sat down and showed me what the basic beat of the song was. It was a simple 4/4 rock beat. I got behind the drums and he just kind of like stood there and watched me like like a Catholic nun with a ruler and like no hit the bass drum on two, like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
like that sort of thing. That was literally the only instruction
No
I've ever
pressure.
had for playing drums ever, was my dad standing over me for that song, the
Yeah,
very first song I ever learned. That kind of started things off, for my musical path. So if it wasn't for Denny Carell, Barrett Lewis would not be doing this podcast right now, probably.
that's
So
funny. Yeah,
it's
right
kind of
on.
funny. Well,
Yeah,
Justin, it's been a real pleasure talking to you this evening and getting to know you a little bit better. And and I know we've had some, as we were talking before we got on air, some mutual connections and those things, and had the opportunity to mix it up. But I'm loving hearing some stuff in your past that I wouldn't have known otherwise had we not had the conversation tonight.
sure.
It's amazing that you got to see Jeff Buckley. I don't think I know anybody
Yeah, I
that's
know.
got to see Jeff Buckley, and man, what an amazing musician he was as well. So that's
Like,
pretty incredible that you got that
I've seen,
experience.
especially being like a concert promoter, I've got to see some shows that like I'd maybe never have done otherwise, and it's
Sure.
like definitely no regrets. Like great experiences. Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember
I
what I was
think
gonna say
I think another
now.
like great side effect of the concert promoting thing, because I kind of helped with some of that down here in Farmington too, is like unknowingly you make these connections and friends that you don't know that end up being like almost lifelong friends, if you will, or at least from the point
Yeah.
that you met them too. So there's such an importance, and you kind of grazed upon this point earlier, is the fact that like there's such a community there, and it's really incredible. It's like some of the people that you get to meet, and lifelong friendships that bud from it.
Oh yeah. I mean, we're like, especially with not waving, like some of the tours we did, we were beyond lucky to like to meet some of the people that we have. Because I mean, like this day forward, a bunch of those guys went on to do like Circus Survive
Yeah,
and other things, and and they're and like bands like Alex from Open Hand, he's with Seosin now, so it's like and like going back to Furnace Fest, it all feels like very full circle to us because like we're getting to see like friends of bands that we played with like 20 25 years ago, but some of these people have like went on to like much larger bands, and they're we'll get
sure.
to see them like perform with those acts and stuff too. So it's just I'm really looking forward to Furnace Fest because it's going to be like a huge high school reunion, man. It's
Oh,
going
I
to be
bet.
crazy. But like, I was just like looking at the list and seeing like people that we know and like people that we got to know over the years. Like I'm excited to see Brad and the Juliana Theory gang guys. My friend Ryan Seaman, that we originally met Ryan when we were like doing just like a quick like headlining tour to the West Coast and back,
Hmm.
and we were playing Salt Lake City, and oh my god, I can't remember the name of his band, but they were kind of like a Refused esque kind of sounding, like
Talking my language.
rock punk hardcore type
Yeah,
sounding band.
yeah.
Like I want to say it was called like Fast Catch Getaway or Runaway, or I don't know, Fast something. I'm totally butchering the name, but whatever it was, like we got to know him then, but he's been in like a million bands since then. Like he toured with the Eyeliners shortly after that. He's been in Falling in Reverse, I Am Ghosts.
Oh wow.
God, what else has he been in? Like he's playing with Juliana Theory now. I guess that was like the point that I wanted to get to, was like getting to see him play drums with like other friends of mine that like
Yeah.
never knew that he knew them in the first place, type of
Right.
thing. Like it's just kind of crazy seeing like and like I've known the Poison the Well guys too over the years, but like
Love
seeing
them.
Vadim from This Day Forward play guitar with those guys, like
Yeah.
it just warms my heart seeing like some of these dudes that like that I still keep in touch with just really getting to do what they love and at the level that they're doing it. And I love that. I love seeing friends succeed and do shit like that. So it's quite remarkable to be able to share that experience with a lot of these people, like in Furnace Fest,
Sure.
that we get the chance to do that again, because it's been so long since we've played at that level, you know.
Absolutely.
So being up at like a huge national festival like that,
Definitely.
we're excited. So it'll be awesome.
Yeah, and that's another great thing. And I've had such a good fortune, particularly with this season of the podcast, talking to so many bands that were active, in the years that you guys were active and as they were, and had a long hiatus and got back together. And
Yeah.
the instances of bands getting back together too, like a Poison the Well, for example, and doing shows like this, and you guys, man, it's just really beautiful. I love seeing comeback stories and reunions, and it just kind of sends that big message out there that the dream never dies, and never say never, and never give up on it. So I'm so happy to see that
Yeah.
you guys are getting this opportunity. Well deserved. I
Thank you.
can't wish you guys anything but the best.
And if anybody's interested in checking either Two Hands, We're Not Waving Out, we're on all the streaming sites, Bandcamp if you want to purchase it. So
Absolutely.
we're relatively easy to find on all that. So.
And as always with our guests in the episode details, we're going to have everything linked up. So you guys will be
Okay,
able to
cool.
jump to the Two Hands stuff on Bandcamp. Of course, that's where we always try to usher people toward to more directly support the artists. I think you guys might have some limited supplies. I'm not sure what you might have for Not Waving But Drowning on Bandcamp, but certainly can get the discography on CD here. It's hard to do things
Right on.
backwards sometimes,
Yeah, I think we've got some of the CDs left. We just got a handful of the 7-inch that we did on Mind Over Matter Records like 5 years ago. Austin unearthed a handful of those, so we've got like 15 copies to sell at some of the upcoming
Yeah.
shows. I don't know if we have anything like what we'll have at Furnace Fest, but we'll definitely try to have some stuff ready for them too.
And
So
I believe you guys have got some like buttons and stickers up there too as well. So
maybe like it's dwindling,
running
but we'll
down.
probably have to restock.
I got you.
Yeah,
Well, get on it, folks, while you can.
yeah.
But we'll have everything linked up in the episode details. Once again, Justin, thank you for your time this evening, folks. Check out Two Hands, One Engine, upcoming shows. We're going to have the Instagram link. I know Justin's very good about posting that stuff on Instagram and Facebook. And so we'll have those links so you guys can catch a show upcoming. For that, be sure to check out the show on the 29th. These guys are going to get out and knock some rust off, but also cover Zayo, one of their good friends from years of past and current day.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that we haven't done a show in 5 years, and the last time we played a show was opening for Zayo, and now we're doing a Zayo set.
There we go.
Yeah,
it was meant to be, right? Meant to be.
Yeah, I guess so.
Absolutely. Hey there, this is Barrett from the ATI Podcast here to talk about what we have going on the ATI Podcast Network. First, we'll start with Waxing On with R&J. The format of Waxing On with R&J is audible selections made exclusively by our hosts and brothers, Ridge Jackson and Jake Jackson. Waxing On with R&J is sure to tickle your inner eardrums with some of the most vile tones you've ever encountered, and conversely, ear candy with pop melodies, focusing on spotlighting underground and rising artists. Waxing On with R&J is another outlet of the ATI podcast community to bring awareness to many musicians' craft. Also found on the ATI Podcast Network, Nod Narb's Closet, hosted by Brandon Stewart of Edos Inn. Nod Narb's Closet is a wing of the ATI podcast programming that delves into the world of roleplay games, miniature painting, diorama making, occasional pro wrestling match watch-alongs, providing commentary with a dash of jocularity and satire, and much, much more. Of course, leading the pack is the ATI Podcast. On the ATI Podcast, we episodically invite guests onto our show to spotlight their talents, whether that's musicians, filmmakers, artists, actors, businesses, even athletes. Nothing is off the table. The focus of the ATI Podcast and its collective creative arms, whether that's Waxing On with R&J or Nod Narb's Closet, is to bring awareness and focus to people's talents. Be sure to follow us across all traditional podcasting platforms, and for the full experience, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search the ATI Podcast. Stay safe out there. Hey, this is Barrett from the ATI Podcast. Episodically, I will be chatting with a featured guest, bringing a spotlight to their craft. Artists, musicians, filmmakers, actors, small businesses, athletes. Nothing is out of bounds. Hear my discussion with rising talents and entrepreneurs across all traditional podcasting platforms, as well as YouTube. Like what you hear? Be sure to subscribe to the podcast channel of your choice, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. Just click the subscribe button and leave us a 5-star rating. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, where you can get full video episodes of the ATI Podcast and see our guests in their work. Stay in touch with our ongoings, events, and guest list across all major social media outlets: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, X. Just search the ATI Podcast. We would like to thank you all for your continued support, and as always, stay safe out there.